Hi, welcome to another episode of The Consulting Trap. I'm your host, Brian Maddox. With me today is Bridgette Orten from Rubato Media. Welcome, Bridgette.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So you're very welcome. So can you tell me a little bit more about your background and where you come from?
Yes, I am a digital marketer, specifically for e-commerce brands, and I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee originally. I moved to New York City like every young girl's Sex in the City dream, and I worked for a few agencies there. I had the opportunity to build a division of an agency there, but my dreams took me across the pond to Europe. I left that company to be on a launch team for an agency. I was part of a very exciting growth trajectory. It was like 40 million in the second year that I was there. I was the only salesperson and client manager, but I decided to leave that position to start my own brand, Rubato. Rubato has taken many forms over the past few years. And most recently, it was kind of at its peak of 25 clients, 10 employees, and I closed that version of it to be kind of more true to myself. And now I'm just working with a few brands and kind of figuring out my next big thing. And in the meantime, I've been traveling outside the US since 2016. So that's a big part of my story as well. And I guess the only other fun fact about me is I do not have a digital marketing degree. I actually have a classical piano performance degree. Super random. So that kind of sums up some of the highlights of Bridgette's life the past few years.
So Bridgette, that's like super interesting. And I can't leave it alone. So how does the performance degree influence the decisions you're making now?
Yeah, wow, that's such an interesting question. I take so much actually from my training in music. I think first and foremost, probably my work ethic, because I was working for months and months on a 1-hour performance. For example, I had, 1 or 2 concerts per year that I would train all year for. So that definitely plays into who I am today. I think, passion driven. I definitely have that spiritual musician vibe that I bring into my work. Rubato, actually, the name comes from music, which means that you can kind of flex the tempo to match the music and the emotion of that. And that's what I wanted to do with my company, is to kind of build something that fit me. So those are a few things top of mind, but there's so many, even just performing and studying performance and doing that well. There's so much that I do in advertising that's performing or presenting myself, or marketing in general is a lot of presentation. And I studied that and how to, do that at a very high level. So lots of correlations for sure.
It's absolutely awesome. And I think so the name and how much performance influences the business that you're in. How is that flexibility? You've mentioned you've been through multiple iterations of your company. So flexibility is clearly baked in. How did you determine when and where to pivot in your business?
Yeah. Well, there's been several iterations, and I would say different reasons for different ones. When I first got started, I was actually running on a performance basis. So I was buying media with my own money and getting paid for actions on the other side, like a cost per lead, cost per download, etc. That worked to a certain point and just stopped working. So I was burning thousands of dollars at one point, and I couldn't figure it out. So I had to pivot. This most recent time that I pivoted was more about I just didn't feel an alignment with the passion, with the vision, with just how I felt every day. It wasn't all aligning. I felt it. It was more like an intuition thing of, what I was spending the majority of my time on versus how I felt the majority of my time. But in between those two things, that was kind of beginning and end. There was another pivot that I did. And I would say that was kind of the pivot from more freelance version of my company to a more, to more infrastructure and having full-time employees and growing my client list. And that was more about the fact that I kept on feeling like I was on this roller coaster of, I would have 2 or 3 clients, maybe one was even paying me, $10,000, $15,000 a month. And then a couple of other smaller ones, my time super wrapped up in that. I actually think that we spoke about that the first time that we connected. And then, I would lose one of these big clients and, they hired internally or, sometimes it was my fault, sometimes no fault of my own. And then boom, my finances were screwed up and I was sitting there, trying to pay rent on a credit card again. And I did that for a couple of years and I thought, this is crazy. I have to get outside of this roller coaster of my finances. And so I built infrastructure for that reason, which totally changed the essence of my business at the time. So those are the 3 core pivots that I've made to date. I'm sure there will be more as we go along.
This is you've encapsulated the consulting trap perfectly. Actually, the whole name of the show. So when you started to put infrastructure in place, what was the nature of that infrastructure? Our listeners are going to be looking for kind of the takeaways here that they can run with. And when you say you put in infrastructure and that problem went away, my light bulbs are going off like, okay, well, so now I have to know, like, what were the things that you did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few things come to mind, even though I could probably talk for days about this particular item. One thing is that I was able to, by hiring a few employees, which had its own journey, I didn't just magically come up with more employees. But once I got to that point where I had a few employees and I had clients, the biggest thing was that I was able to have some large clients, some small clients, some medium-sized clients. And I was able to spread that out to where even if I lost a large one or I lost 2 small ones or whatever, the system still worked. And so there are some economies with scale that did work. So I was stable. My finances evened out. All of that was kind of accomplished by being able to manage more clients. And then I purposefully had different sizes of clients. I did not optimize just for the big ones because that's tough to manage from the P&L. I hired a business coach. I begged people to come on and work with me. Talking about the growth, I really believed in it at the time. It was very easy for me to sign clients. Now there's kind of some more competition in the industry, but I was straight hustling, working crazy hours to do to build that infrastructure. And yeah, we can probably, this probably segues into another thing, but one of the things that I feel like I did wrong in that process of trying to build infrastructure was I grew the infrastructure without necessarily growing very structured processes. And I could never catch up. Once I grew the business like that, I had salaries to pay. I was paying like $80,000 a month of salaries. And, that's a lot of stress and pressure. And to try to go back with all of these clients, and I had a creative team, I had editors, I had a media team. We were doing all kinds of things. And to try to structure it after the fact, I never caught up with that. I think there's probably ways that it were possible. We talked about it all the time as a team. We tried, but we never could, with the bandwidth that we had doing the work, we never caught up fully with building the processes, which was a catalyst in the end to me choosing to close the business.
So that process set that you're mentioning, that infrastructure, right? Are you talking about service delivery processes? Are you talking about demand generation processes? Which ones were the ones that were almost impossible to retrofit? How did that work, and what was going on there that when you made that decision?
Mm-hmm. I think there were kind of 2 things. Probably oversimplified version of what was actually happening, but from a high level, I think that there were a lot of moving parts of onboarding a client. There always are. Now I've had months to work on processes, and I'm working with a very small handful of clients, so I can see just how many moving parts there were, and now I've organized them. So all of those moving parts did not sync well. And as I was hiring more and more people, that just spread those moving parts over different people. And there was no centralized place. It's like we do this, then we do this, then we do this. And there also wasn't that accountability of those things. But furthermore, training. And those two things kind of go hand in hand. But it was very difficult for me whenever I was hiring people because I needed them to do things. And they had a lot of experience, but they didn't have experience with my team, with my clients, with my business. And I saw this problem at the time, but I didn't have the time to solve it. And so, there's probably ways to solve the problem of training after the fact at the stage of business that I was in. So if you're in that place, don't think that it's not possible. I chose not to continue trying to solve it, but it is so much easier to do that on the front end in every role coming in, to think about, hey, even if this person has 10 years of experience, don't be naive in thinking that they won't need training. So that's, the two ways that now I'm doing it again at a very small scale in a way that I enjoy, but I'm fixing those two things from day one. And it's like magic. It's crazy how well it works.
Interesting, because I've drawn this distinction in the past with other folks that I've worked with, and one of the things that comes up is there's two ways to grow. You can grow like a weed, right, which is out of control and unmanageable, or you can grow with intention, like as in a garden or a flower or a vegetable or something like that. As you've ran into those infrastructure problems, I think that the underlying sort of assumption there was that the business was already there, right? So you were already, everything was in flight. So everything you were trying to do was, changing the wheels on the bus while you're driving it, kind of thing. This, it sounds like this approach that you're taking right now is processing all that learning and being more deliberate as you onboard. But on the business demand side, how are you putting processes to that? Because that's another key part of that conversation.
And by business demand, you mean signing clients, essentially?
Business development. How are you
Mm-hmm.
growing? Are you as process focused on that side of the conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the time, I was, and that was one of the things that, as a bootstrap business, I'm very, very, very structured, and I never wanted to not be able to pay salaries. That was the most important thing to me, was people getting paid and on time. So that was something that I had people in place. I had processes, I had systems. We were using HubSpot, paying hundreds of dollars a month for that. Like, we were investing in new business development, and it worked. We did well in the very early days. We actually closed all of our business from Upwork. And then we had to move outside of Upwork because that was just capturing current demand. And I knew that to really scale, we had to get into the, not necessarily creating demand, but playing in a wider market. So, we did have to adjust our biz dev quite drastically. Now, fast forward to today, I'm in a completely different landscape now, selling my business, knowing all this stuff, having had all this success. I have less success on biz dev now than I did 4 years ago. And that's due to competition. And I think that competition has also made the market better. So it's not only competitive with number of people, and it's competitive with the quality that advertisers are experiencing. So my strategy now is to not be sending a million cold emails, but going with the content and providing value. And I'm going slow because I can. And that's the way that I'm setting up this business. To your point, right, about the garden, that's exactly how I'm setting this up. And I'm not building infrastructure that I can't manage with sales that are actually kind of more organic. And I don't mean organic from a lack of effort, but I mean organic as in not trying to force it, but, as the system grows, slowly building the infrastructure along with it.
So that's really interesting in your space. And again, we've had consultants of all stripes on the show, so it's interesting to me. Is there a viable product ladder in your marketplace, or is it straight to, off you go? It's time for the big media spend.
So you mean like size and spend of clients, and if people with less experience have opportunities with smaller accounts, and then so
Yeah, I
forth.
mean,
Is that what you
how
mean?
does that ladder work? Is there an entry level kind of equivalent purchase option for clients that are looking for this kind of service versus
Hmm.
the full on media blitz conglomerate kind of thing where it's like everywhere all at once?
Yeah, I think that more so than ever. And what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of decentralization in the market in general, with a lot of freelancing with paid digital media. And not only freelancers, but freelancers not just in the US for US clients. There's a huge influx of people in South America, especially, sorry, who are coming into the market, and I'm here, so I see that. But I know that there's many other places too that are way, way, way cheaper. So you have very high level talent that's working with big brands, like brands that we know, like Coca-Cola or whatever, but it's the South American version of that. So they get this excellent experience in training. They speak very good English, and they offer themselves at a price that works for their economies and their country, which is usually way, way, way less than the American economy. So I say that American talent tends to be very high priced and sometimes high value. And that is kind of flipping and decentralizing. So I think that I see a lot of brands go to these, smaller one-off guys that are super happy to close a client for 500 US dollars per month and give 100% of themselves, more than they've ever given in their life, and then you have all of the different layers above that with small teams of people. And then you have US small agencies and, so forth. The last thing I'll mention about this is that, agencies do tend to kind of play on the types of clients that they work with. So some scale their economies with, $500 a month clients, and they have like 50 accounts for every rep. And then you have the agencies that specifically have like 3 people for every 3 accounts or even less, So there's all these kind of dynamics as well, as far as like how many accounts each one of those reps is working on.
It sounds like the marketplace there is complicated, and if you're new to it, you're going to definitely need a guide, which is one of the wonderful reasons to have you on the show. So,
Yes.
Bridgette, as we wrap up, who should reach out to you and get that kind of guidance, and how should they do so?
Yeah. So anybody who would like to pick my brain about anything, whether it's, building the business or, traveling plus career, or if you're a client needing some help in your account, I love chatting with people. I'm happy to help free of charge. I love meeting new people. So don't hesitate to reach out for any reason. Probably the best way to reach me is on either LinkedIn. So you can find me with my name, Bridgette Orten, or with my email, which is Bridgette@rubatomedia.com. I'll spell that out. My first name is spelled Bridgette. And then Rubato is Rubato. So Bridgette@rubatomedia.com. Happy to receive any outreach there.
Awesome. And if you can help us as we close the show here, summarize the 3 big takeaways that you have had in your process so far, either your 3 biggest reading influences or 3 biggest media influences, whatever, or the 3 truths that you've discovered in your process. We're looking for the magic 3 at the end. Do you have any?
Yes, I do. The way that I think about this is kind of more mentality. So there's 3 parts of my mentality that I think have really served me well. The first thing is that I believe that my desires are part of my purpose. So as I'm chasing after my desires, I actually believe in that path, which gives me a lot of strength. The second thing is I have a very, very high tolerance for risk. This just serves me like a charm. And the last thing is that I do give myself permission at any stage, once I arrive at what I want, to blow it all up and revamp myself again. And I think that's really important, to give yourself permission to get what you want, and then that not to be what you want anymore, and to change your mind. So I always encourage people, change your mind. It's totally cool.
That is awesome. Bridgette, thank you so much for your time today. Our listeners certainly have profited, as have I, from the guidance you've provided. Thank you again.
Great. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have suggestions for future episodes or would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at brian@podcastchef.com. That's BRIAN at podcastchef.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your business to the next level.